Now that I'm delighted to be joined, Cabinet Secretary of State, very excited, Michelle Donelan, Science and Technology Secretary. Welcome to Jeremy Kyl's Talk Drive. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm good. Yourself?
You've got a sense of humour, Michelle, haven't you? Because it struck me quite strange that the Science and Technology Secretary is on the phone and can't make the FaceTime work.
I can make the FaceTime work, but I've got an eye infection, so I'd rather not
That has
let your
thrown it
viewers see.
right. Do you know what, Michelle? That they were all laughing at me now. That
I know.
you've destroyed
I've
me.
ruined your joke, but I thought your viewers would rather not see this puppy eye this morning,
Well,
this
listen,
afternoon.
listen. I really appreciate you coming on that case, and I shall go next door and have stern words with them. Welcome to the show. Good of you to take the time. Much I want to talk to you about. Let's start with the Labour manifesto. The Tory angle, of course, is that so much is promised and not a lot is promised about how that will be achieved. That, I suspect, is the Tory response to a manifesto that says we want to create wealth and growth, we promise stability over chaos, long term over short term, and an end to the Tory era, Michelle Donelan, of gestures and gimmicks. How do you respond to that?
I think it's the same thing that we've seen from Labour for a long time, just a collection of sound bites with no actual substance. But the thing that really worries me is the gaping hole in the finances behind this, because that can only really mean one thing, and that is taxes on working people who have been through very hard times with the global cost of living crisis. I don't think my constituents deserve more taxes. That's exactly why our manifesto is pledging to cut taxes, and we'd already begun to do that with two lots of national insurance, etc. And I worry in particular for more vulnerable groups and pensioners who seem to have been omitted almost from Labour's thinking here. They won't back our triple lot plus, for instance. And when I've been knocking on doors, pensioners are genuinely worried about what is going to come, and they don't have the option of going and getting a different job or a job, obviously.
You talk, and I had some Mark Spencer on, former Chief Whip to Boris, of
Mm.
course, and Agriculture Minister yesterday, Farming Minister, and I put to him, this isn't a specific policy, it's just a feeling, and I'd love your response, and I'm delighted that you took the time to come to us. The Tory party has had its problems, everybody knows that. And there is always that concern or that belief, I suspect, after a certain number of years, there becomes fatigue. What's particularly obvious if you're me and you sat here every single day, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to your leader, is the British public have stopped listening. And I think there is a huge apathy. I think there is disenchantment. I think people are disengaged with politics in general. But I think the Tory party are on the back foot. I watched the situation in Grimsby last night. And,
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak wanted the job. He made that very obvious. I'd love somebody to tell me, I know all about the war in Ukraine. I know all about the impact of COVID. It was he who spent 400 billion. I just would love somebody in the Tory party to explain to me how you believe in the next 3 weeks you can create almost a full circle turn when there is so much cynicism, Michelle, because there is. And you know that. You're an honest lady. There is on the street
Yeah.
a massive cynicism. How do you go out? How do you face that? How do you try and change that?
So I think there is also a lot of undecided voters. I believe it's still unprecedented amounts. It's certainly more than I've ever experienced on the doorstep of people that are genuinely still thinking about which way to vote. And normally at this point in a campaign, they've made their mind up. And let's face it, there's no love for Keir Starmer. We're not opening the door and they're saying that they want to vote for Keir
But that must
Starmer.
be the most frustrating thing for you. There is no great love for Keir Starmer. I believe he could be blindfolded and put to sleep and would probably, if you listen to the polls, walk into 10 Downing Street in 3 weeks. That must be frustrating because as a Conservative, the things that you believe in that haven't materialised, you can see what a Labour government's going to do. But how, as I say, do you manage to convince people? I'm old enough to remember the last Labour government. I know exactly what it's going to be like. But
Yeah.
my frustration is the message from the Tory party is seemingly not getting through.
So I think we do that by constantly knocking on doors. I knock on doors about 8 hours at least a day, talking to residents and also via platforms like yourself about the fact that we have turned a corner. The economy is not only recovering, it's now growing. Inflation is down beyond what was predicted when Rishi first entered office. We have the availability and the possibility now to cut people's taxes. That's why it's our top priority, because we believe that people should spend the money in their own money, and the best place to do that. And we're offering some bold policies that will bring you a better future, whereas the opposite is a manifesto that isn't fully funded will mean that you're going to pay around £2,000 extra per household. This is a drastic offer from Labour, and I think that we still have time to turn this around.
But I get that, and I love the fact that you're positive. But your cabinet colleague yesterday, Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, this week, he literally said to the British public, you need to be very careful not to give Keir Starmer a supermajority. To me, and to many onlookers, that smacks of he knows he's going to lose already and is already throwing his hat in the ring. So I guess, and Peter's with me, I'm trying to glean, Michelle. I respect you enormously for coming on. How you feel you're going to get this across to people? Do you know what I mean, Peter?
Yes, I do, and I think it's interesting, Michelle. I'd be really interested in this as well. Just how, I mean, you do think you can turn things around in 3 weeks. I mean, how do you think you're going to do that? Because you've got the manifesto out there. You've got Rishi Sunak. He should have absolutely knocked that out of the park last night if he was going to win. He didn't, and the polling information shows us that as well. I mean, what is going to happen in the next 3 weeks to change this consistent lead over 3 years? Labour 20 points ahead.
So I come back to the point that there is still a hell of a lot of undecided people who haven't made their mind up yet, and
but they would basically all have to vote for you to win.
Yeah, and there will also be people that will peel off Labour as well. But we haven't had an election. Come on, this is all polls. This is all hypothetical. So
well,
what really?
With respect, it's not really hypothetical, because we've got 3 years of polls. We've got the local elections. Okay, it's not the whole country, but it showed massive Labour gains, massive Lib Dem gains.
Local elections are always different to general elections, so it is hard to draw too much.
Can I make it easy for you both? I like the fact that Michelle believes that, right? I understand, Pete, what you should, Michelle, what we're both saying, because the proof is there. Of course, nobody knows till election day. What I'm trying to say is I think the British people are fatigued with your government, which is scary for some people, because there are plenty of people who believe that a Tory wipeout will risk a one-party socialist state for many, many years, and I think that's a concern for many, many people. Can I add also into the argument, Michelle, what about Nigel Farage? I mean, I came back from holiday 10 days ago. That blockbuster announcement he was going to lead reform, stand for Parliament. They're near you in terms of the polls. We know they'll get certain numbers in each constituency, not many seats overall. But he must be concerned today. He says that he'd be happy to merge Reform and Conservative. I mean, the political landscape, you're talking a good fight, I get that, but the political landscape in this country could change forever in 3 weeks.
Well, I think maybe Farage is realising the fact that actually he is leading a party that is potentially going to prop up Labour by enabling them to gain power by shaving off enough votes off Conservatives in enough seats.
Well, I'm going to say something, and I don't mean this because it's great to have you on. I think that's ludicrous, and I'm not sticking up for Nigel Farage, because many people will say it's about his ego. I know from many people who have phoned this show that he resonated with so many people, the way he spoke and what he said. But this constant Tory, he's just going to take votes off us. When he was UKIP, he took votes off Labour. The problem is, I believe, from a lot of my listeners, help me out, Pete, he is saying the things that traditional Tories that you have lost. I talked about this yesterday. I was brought up to believe in, low tax, fiscal responsibility, a strong military and secure borders. After 14 years, Michelle, not your fault, but actually you can't say that that's happened. And I think that's why he's resonating. And old Starmer, Ming Var Starmer, says absolutely nothing and he's walking to Downing Street. That's the frustration, Michelle. That's all I'm saying.
So look, on Farage, you're completely right. He is a very intelligent, persuasive individual that's been highly successful in politics at getting people to hear his cause. And nobody is denying that at all. And nobody is denying the frustrations of the British public when it comes to key issues like immigration. But there's only one party that can actually solve that problem. It's not going to be Reform. They haven't got any chance of entering into number 10. There are only two people that can become the next Prime Minister. That is Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer. And it's as simple as that. So therefore, what we're saying is that by voting for Reform, it can only do one thing, which is damage the Conservative Party and help lead to a Labour.
So where do you think? This is brilliant, and I'm really appreciative of this. Right. So if I was advising the Tory party, I'd be saying, right, the 5, 6 million, 4 million, whatever is it, people that are apparently and allegedly going to vote for Reform, I'd be saying to my party, Why have we lost those people and how do we get them back? Rather than standing up and saying a vote for reform is a vote for Labour, I'd be saying patently what they're saying is resonating with those floating voters. My question to you, Michelle, and the Conservatives is, do you not look in the mirror and think that if we hadn't deviated from what the Tory party was, irrespective of what's gone on in the world, those people would still be on side? I'd want to try and get them back. That's all I'm saying.
So I think some of those people are frustrated that we haven't made more progress on things like immigration in a quicker fashion, and we're frustrated about that too, and that's why we have tried to leave no stone unturned when it comes to immigration, for instance. And that's why we went back and re-legislated on Rwanda. That's why we redid the treaty. That's why we booked the plane already. But we aren't just saying a vote for reform is a vote for Labour. We're also saying if you vote Conservative, if you care about these issues like immigration, here's our plan. If you care about making sure that Brexit is a success, look at our management of the economy, look at how we're doubling down on making sure that all of our policies are in the best interests of our country, etc., etc. So it's not a negative message that we're sending out constantly, but we do need to be realistic and make sure that voters know the consequences of certain votes.
But we were in a situation, I was sitting in Downing Street when Rishi Sunak gave that press conference, Michelle, where he said, the flights are, all that you've just said, the flights are booked, they're all taking off, we've got this policy, whatever happens, come what may, those flights are taking off. But now the likelihood is they won't take off. I mean, if you're so confident in that immigration policy, if you're so confident in that aspect of it, I know it's not the whole policy, but the Rwanda flights is a very important plank of your immigration policy. If you're so confident that that was going to work, why call an election in early July? Why not call it in a month or two later to let people see those flights taking off and make their mind up about whether the policy was effective or not?
Well, look, the Prime Minister called the election because there was so much talk that was becoming a big distraction to actually getting on with the job of governing. We've got that flight booked for July. The letters have been going out. The people have been booked onto that manifest. But it can only happen with a Conservative government. And Labour have already said one of the first things they'll do is scrap that policy, full stop.
Can I ask you a question before I let you go? And I'm very, very grateful, I repeat, really grateful. When did you find out you and the Cabinet was going to be an election? Because yesterday, the appalling story, another body blow to Rishi Sunak, that his closest ally in terms of his parliamentary private secretary, Craig Williams, who's standing for re-election, had a £100 bet at Ladbrokes 3 days before Rishi Sunak called the election. Were the Cabinet in the dark, or did they know as well?
So I knew the same time as the rest of the Cabinet, where there was a Cabinet meeting just before Rishi Sunak went onto the street of Downing Street and announced that general election. I was actually in South Korea because we just had the AI Safety Summit, the follow-up to what we did at Bletchley Park. So I had a call from the Deputy Prime Minister just moments before the Prime Minister stepped out onto the street. But by that point, there was a lot of media speculation.
What's your response to Craig Williams having a bet 3 days before?
Look, I'm not going to comment on that because I think that is being looked into. Yeah. As I said, the Cabinet didn't know till the afternoon of. I highly doubt that he had any knowledge ahead of the Cabinet, but I'm not going to comment on it because I don't know the specifics.
Really appreciate your time, and I mean that, Michelle. I know it's hard, you're out in the streets, I know you're fighting a battle, but we appreciate you giving us time on Talk. That's Michelle Donelan, Science and Technology Secretary.